or in this case perhaps secession movements, are not won with a majority of the population. The American Revolution, which we prefer to think of as sort of the English colonies' successful secession effort against the British Empire in 1776, really was waged or won with between 25% and 33% of the American or the colonial population, depending on whose historical numbers you use. So we don't need everybody in Vermont to be on board with the notion of peaceable secession. What we do need is a critical mass of people. I would say 25 or 30% to sort of get the ball rolling. So, 8% is 1/3 of that ish.
Well, another way to look at it is no one's talking about secession, really. I mean, this little paper that we're putting out for over a year now is the first attempt to carry on a public dialogue about the idea of it. So when you think of it that way, very few people have sort of heard that there's a conversation going on. Conversation obviously is a complicated one. It's not going to happen overnight. So the annual polling thing that was done by UVM, which it does every year, when we put that question in, that's 8% that never even entered the conversation. So that's a pretty high number.
It is, and it's also, I guess it strikes me that it's a fairly radical notion on its face, too.
Yes, it is.
And to have 8% of people react favorably to that is pretty significant.
It is. Well, another interesting question asked in the poll was how many Vermonters feel like the federal government is unresponsive to their needs, and you know what the percentage there was? 70%. So then the question becomes, okay, so if the federal government in Washington, running the empire, is no longer responding to your needs, what do? Now the typical answer is, well, you just elect somebody, you throw the bums out, right, in D.C., and you elect someone else. But for all kinds of reasons, we're pretty convinced that that just is no longer a viable option.
Well, I think a lot of people would agree that that's been tried.
Yeah.
Exactly.
For 200 years or so, but that's a different discussion.
Exactly. Well, no, I think it's part of the discussion, but I think that 70% number gives us a little bit of, a little bit more hope because.
So who are so Vermont Commons is a discussion. I mean, if people see this, and people can get this publication print with Vermont Guardian last Friday of the month.
That's correct.
But there's also an online, vermontcommons.org.
Right.
And we'll put the website
www.vtcommons.org.
But who is contributing to this discussion? Who are your writers? I mean, I see Rob there. I see you folks, but there's a lot of writers.
They're coming from all over Vermont. We have a well-known, what would you call Kirkpatrick Sale? He lives in New York, but he's a very well-known writer, and he has a column in there damn near every month. So we've got writers on food, on energy, on secession. Our leading political philosopher contributor is down at Emory University, University of in Georgia, and so they're coming from everywhere.
And I think it's important to point out too that they run the sort of the gamut of the political spectrum. I mean, I think the terms of conversation in this country's political discourse right now. We've got red states and blue states, and the measure of
Liberal,
conversation is sort of about this wide. And what we're saying is let's widen the conversational scope to include all kinds of ideas. So, for example, Bill McKibben has contributed a number of pieces for us. He's very well known and lives in Vermont. I wouldn't say that Bill is a secessionist, at least not yet.
No, he's
not. But he's very interested in issues of food and agriculture and energy and sustainability. John McClowry, who runs the Ethan Allen Institute, who's generally sort of considered a more kind of free market, more conservative / libertarian thinker, also has been published in the Vermont Commons. So Peter Clavell, who is the mayor of Burlington, has been published in Vermont Commons. So we're trying to bring together a whole wide range of different perspectives on this question of independence and kind of put them all together in the mix and see what we can, see what sort of shakes out.
And you hit on it there a little bit, Rob, that there's agriculture, there's economics, there's politics, there's energy. They're all part of this discussion, which is part of what makes it so fascinating, is that it's all, there's sort of just different perspectives on the same issue.
We've got trying to put together each issue, we have 3 or 4 broad kind of themes that we invite writers and thinkers to come in and contribute to. One is, an empire is not a democracy. Now, you can argue that the United States is not an empire, it's a democracy, but it's not both.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing that we try to address. The other thing is secession was built into the Founding Fathers' vision of this experimental republic. They themselves led a secession movement. They didn't lead a revolutionary movement. A revolution is designed to change the state. They weren't trying to change the British state. They were trying to secede from it. So we're secessionists at the root, the taproot.
Mm-hmm.
Just as Jefferson and Madison and Franklin and George Washington and Abigail Adams and all of our founding fathers and mothers were, in fact, secessionists. We don't learn them that way, but that's in
Right.
fact, Ian's absolutely right, that's what they were.
Well, and you get at another structure in the United States. The very name
Yeah.
is not it's not a united thing. It's not one thing. It's not Canada.
Yes.
It's
But
the United States, meaning originally they were all independent, sort of in
Right.
agreement.
and
to
then
do this.
then we had a very, very bloody war. And the United States actually was a plural noun until that war was fought.
Hmm.
And after that war, it became a single, that the United States is going to do whatever it's going
Yeah.
to do.
As opposed to
And
the
you
way...
never
yeah.
again, secession was put into...
You're talking about the Civil War.
I'm talking about the Civil War.
Right.
The secession was put into the, I don't know.
It's a
the-
taboo.
It's a
so to
taboo,
speak.
exactly. Good word.
And you know,
Good
the
word.
term Civil War, again, like the term American Revolution, is a bit misleading because it wasn't really a civil war. I mean, the southern states were exercising their right, their sovereign right as states,
Right.
to leave the Union as it was conceived by the framers of the Constitution. Of course, Abraham Lincoln, the founder of the Republican Party and commander-in-chief of the Union Army, decided to wage war to prevent secession.
Right.
And that's really what happened if you look at kind of the history. And again, we don't learn it this way
Right.
in school and what have you.
It's
but
a
this-
revolt.
But
That's
yeah,
the way, I
it's-
mean, we
it's-
see it as an
exactly.
uprising.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really quite different than that. Abraham Lincoln did a number on us, as we like to say.
Is there a third theme? You
Yeah,
said
there's a
the
third theme.
democracy, empire, secession, the second was?
Yeah, and those are broad kind
Sure,
of global
right,
themes.
right.
But then it gets, the third theme is more into what you're talking about and what intrigues you about. For instance, this issue is dealing with restoring our energy commons. This is the May issue.
Yeah.
This was just printed,
Yeah.
published
Yeah.
in the Guardian as an insert. And it goes to the Vermont tradition of being a self-sufficient community or commonwealth of communities, of towns.
Right.
And we feel that's a value system where you supply your own energy, or you supply your own food, you take care of your own health, you handle your own roads, and you don't rely on distant, outside, more wealthy entities to provide these things. You do them yourself. And we haven't completely lost that culture yet in Vermont. So we feel that let's revisit all those things. How would we be independent at this very practical level of turning on the lights, driving the car, and growing our own food? So we do explore those things and keep returning to them, because in a way they're the guts
Yeah.
Right.
of they're not necessarily the bones and the sinew, but they're the guts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the empire, the U.S. empire,